Fuel gauge on empty. 70 miles still to fly. Major Leo Thorsness has already given his tanker away, diverted it to another F-105 crew, even lower on fuel than his own, over North Vietnam, in an aircraft built to drink gas, the way most planes sip it. Now he's coasting, quite literally, on whatever the F-105 Thunderchief can manage on fumes and momentum, hoping the math works out before the engine simply stops asking politely and quits. It's the 19th of April, 1967, and this isn't even the dangerous part of the day. The dangerous part happened an hour ago. To understand how a man ends up gliding a fighter jet on empty, you have to understand what his job actually was that morning, and why nobody sane would call it safe, even before things went wrong. Thorsness flew wild weasel missions, and the name undersold exactly how insane the concept was. A wild weasel's job was to fly directly at enemy surface-to-air missile sites on purpose and let them shoot, because the instant a SAM site locked on and fired, it revealed itself, and revealing itself is what got it destroyed. Bait, in other words, wrapped around a cockpit. While ordinary strike pilots spent 1 or 2 minutes over a target and got out, weasels like Thorsness lingered, sometimes 20 minutes or more, hunting radar signals, waiting to be shot at on purpose so they could shoot back with precision. It was, by design, one of the most statistically dangerous flying jobs of the entire war, and every man who volunteered for it understood the odds going in. By April of 1967, Thorsness had been doing this for months, out of Takli, Thailand, flying the 2-seat F-105 with his electronic warfare officer, Captain Harold Harry Johnson, riding in the back seat, working equipment that mattered as much to survival as the guns did. The two of them had become one of those flying partnerships built on total wordless trust. Johnson reading radar warnings and calling threats in Thorsness's ear, while Thorsness kept the aircraft moving through violent evasive maneuvers, each man depending entirely on the other, doing his job perfectly, mission after mission. He'd already dodged 53 surface-to-air missiles by that point in his tour. 53, each one a near miss that could just as easily have gone the other way. A streak of survival that was starting to feel less like luck and more like something Thorsness had simply willed into being through sheer competence. On the morning of the 19th, Thorsness is leading a flight of 4 F-105s into North Vietnam near Hanoi. He and Johnson take out one SAM radar site with a Shrike missile, then put a direct hit on a second with bombs. 2 sites down, mission going according to plan, until his wingman takes a hit from anti-aircraft fire and goes down, the crew ejecting into hostile jungle below. 2 American airmen suddenly alone on the ground in the middle of enemy territory, with rescue helicopters still minutes away. Thorsness doesn't leave, circling above 2 of his own men, now parachuting into enemy territory. He spots a MiG-17 closing in on the position, an actual dogfight in an aircraft that was never built to be a fighter. The F-105 was designed to haul bombs at speed, not turn and gun another jet out of the sky. Thorsness maneuvers anyway, forces the engagement, and shoots the MiG down, buying critical minutes for the rescue effort forming up below. Then the radio brings worse news. More MiGs inbound, and every American aircraft in the area is running low on fuel from the extended fight. The rescue helicopters most vulnerable of all, slow and unarmed against fighter jets closing in fast. Thorsness makes the call that puts his own aircraft on the ragged edge. His assigned aerial tanker is inbound to refuel him, but another aircraft in the fight is even closer to flaming out entirely. Thorsness diverts his own tanker to that pilot instead, choosing someone else's survival margin over his own, without any guarantee there will be enough fuel left in the sky for him afterward. That's the decision that leaves him coasting the last 70 miles into Udorn, Thailand, gauge reading empty, engine running on whatever residual fuel physics allows a jet to squeeze out of an empty tank. Every mile is its own small negotiation with gravity. Throttle back, trade altitude for distance, stretch a glide that shouldn't be possible in an aircraft this heavy, until finally the runway comes into view and he sets it down with nothing left to spare. He lands. The aircraft holds together long enough to get him down safely, engine dying almost the moment the wheels stop rolling. 11 days later, on the 30th of April, flying his 93rd mission, 7 short of the 100 required to rotate home, close enough to count the missions left on one hand. Thorsness and Johnson are shot down over North Vietnam. They eject. They're captured almost immediately by a mix of local militia and regular North Vietnamese troops, dragged from the wreckage of their own aircraft into a captivity neither of them has any way yet of knowing will last nearly 6 years. What follows isn't processing, isn't paperwork. It's 19 days and 18 nights of interrogation without sleep, a deliberate, calculated method of breaking a man down before the torture even properly begins, designed to strip away resistance through sheer exhaustion before a single blow is struck. It doesn't end there. Over nearly 6 years as a prisoner of war, cycled through camps with names that would become infamous among American POWs, the Hanoi Hilton, Heartbreak Hotel, Skid Row, the Zoo, Thorsness is beaten, isolated, and tortured with a severity that leaves his back broken in 4 places. For roughly 3 of those 6 years, the brutality is close to constant. Ropes and beatings used systematically to extract confessions and propaganda statements before international pressure finally forces conditions to ease, at least somewhat, in the war's final years. Inside those walls, POWs find ways to survive that have nothing to do with weapons. Thorsness learns the tap code, a simple system of taps against cell walls that lets isolated prisoners communicate letter by letter, prisoner to prisoner, through concrete built specifically to keep them from doing exactly that. A tap, a pause, another tap, an entire secret language passed cell to cell by men who might never see each other's faces, built purely to remind each other that nobody was actually as alone as the isolation cells were designed to make them feel. For a stretch of his captivity, one of his cellmates is a Navy pilot named John McCain. 2 men who will each go on to very different, very public post-war lives, sharing a cell built to erase both of them, learning to survive the same walls side by side. Somewhere during those years, word of what Thorsness did on the 19th of April, 1967, makes it back through channels to Washington, and the process for a Medal of Honor recommendation quietly begins, quietly being the operative word. The nomination has to be kept secret, because if the North Vietnamese learn they're holding a future Medal of Honor recipient, the leverage that creates for them, the additional torture it could invite, isn't a risk anyone in Washington is willing to take with a man already broken in 4 places. So the paperwork moves forward in total silence, and honor Thorsness himself doesn't even know is being prepared for him, while he sits in a cell, not knowing if he'll live to hear about it either way, not knowing if any of them will. He does. On the 4th of March, 1973, as part of Operation Homecoming, Leo Thorsness comes home, nearly 6 years after he went down, thinner, permanently marked by what years of it did to his back, but alive and free, stepping off an aircraft onto American soil for the first time since a morning in April of 1967 that must have felt, by then, like it belonged to an entirely different lifetime. Later that year, President Richard Nixon places the Medal of Honor around his neck for what happened on that single morning, a citation that reads, in the dry language of military commendation, like a routine mission report, and reads, in every other sense, like a man who kept making the harder choice at every single decision point in a fight that offered him easier ones at every turn. Stay with the downed crew, or fly home safe, take the tanker for himself, or send it to someone who needed it more, land the damaged jet, or eject early and save himself the 70-mile gamble. He chose the harder answer every single time, and he is one of only 13 Air Force personnel to receive the medal for the entire war. The medal doesn't undo 6 years. Thorsness spends the rest of his life carrying both, the honor and what it cost to eventually collect it. He retires from the Air Force as a full colonel, later serves as a state senator in Washington, and writes his own account of what those years inside enemy prison walls actually looked like, in a book he titles, With the Plainest Possible Honesty, Surviving Hell. Asked decades later what those years had taught him, Thorsness didn't reach for anything abstract or comfortable. He talked about freedom, how hard it is to actually understand its value until it's gone completely, and how it isn't a thing any generation gets to inherit permanently and keep without effort. It has to be re-earned, he said, by every generation that comes after, or it slips away quietly, the way almost everything does when nobody's paying close enough attention to notice it going. There's a detail from those prison years that Thorsness carried differently than the medal itself. A moment alone in a cell, tapping out a message to a man he'd never met and would never see, both of them trusting a code built from nothing but patience and the wall between them. It cost nothing to send. It meant everything to receive. In a place designed to convince every prisoner he was utterly alone, that single tap rhythm through concrete was its own quiet act of defiance. Smaller than shooting down a MiG, smaller than giving away a tanker of fuel, but built from exactly the same instinct. Someone else's survival mattered as much as his own, even when his own was already hanging by a thread. This is Leo Thorsness, the pilot who gave away his own fuel to save someone else, and then spent 6 years finding out exactly what it costs a person to keep choosing the harder decision, again and again, long after anyone would have blamed him for choosing differently.